these acquisition opportunities by looking at really two filters. The first filter that we look at typically is a strategic filter. Does the business fit our strategic mold and what we want to do with the group as a whole? But then second is, does it really fit our financial measures and our financial metrics? And if it passes these two, then we're more than open to look at acquisition. But we see there's opportunity to grow both organically and inorganically.
Right, all right. Shifting focus a little bit, you've just taken on as chairman of FPSP. Look at the business that you are in right now is hugely dependent on the quality of distribution, agents rather, who distribute the product. There's a huge amount of illiteracy on the investor side, and there's also the agent who tends to mislead or maybe doesn't even understand himself what he's selling. How do you set that right?
See, I'm not going to correct your data, because I think when you talk about mis-selling, the numbers are typically very small, at least relative to the volumes of business that is being done today. But I think the overall issue is really one of financial literacy. And I think if this industry is going to grow to its true potential, if we are really going to convert money from savings and other forms of savings outside of banks into financial savings in the products that we represent, then I think financial literacy becomes very key to this industry and to us as a group. I think there are two bits to financial literacy. I think there is clearly the distributor or the intermediary who plays a very key role in this. That my role in FPSB clearly plays to that piece, which is really around how do you empower distributors to provide better advice to the customers that they're advising. Because at the moment, you have a mix of people. You have people who are really providing some good advice, but you have people who are pushing paper. And I don't think we should put the two necessarily in the same box. But I think it's equally important for individuals, customers, investors to also improve their awareness of the products they're buying. And I think that's something again that'll take a bit of time. I think there's a fair amount of work already going on in terms of increasing awareness from a customer viewpoint. But I think it's important that both people take the responsibility to improve their literacy, if you like, or their awareness. Because I think only with that will people take better decisions going forward. And that's the most important thing for financial freedom for any individual.
All right, interesting thoughts there. We'll take a quick break and we'll come back, Ajay, to grill you on, of course, India as a story and what you make of the markets. You're watching View from the Top, and I'm with Ajay Srinivasan in a chat, and next I'm going to move to the markets. Ajay, the current bull run, I mean, it's a complete turnaround. Is it backed by solid fundamentals, or are you beginning to see froth build in?
Well, I think as many people have been saying over the course of the last 2-3 months, I think there's a lot of liquidity in the system. And I think a lot of the valuations and asset prices that you're seeing today are clearly driven by that liquidity, both domestically as well as internationally, because I think you are seeing increased flows from outside of India. Having said that, I think the fundamentals are not as bad as they were a year ago. I think if you look at, whether you look at industrial production, whether you look at the way autos are doing, the way cement is doing, the way several other core industries are doing, I think there is clearly sign of improvement over the course of this last 6 months. I think also you will see earnings upgrades as we go into the second half of this year. And I think when earnings upgrades kind of happen, you'll start seeing valuations look very different. Having said all of that, I still think markets are probably at, are testing fair value at where they stand today.
Mm-hmm. Between domestic consumption or a global play, what would you pick?
Oh, domestic consumption any day. I think that is a big advantage of India. I think that's the true India story. So much of domestic-led stories. I think anything with a view outside of India, I would be a little less optimistic about, because I still think the US, Europe, and some of the developed world is going to take a little bit of time to get back into the days that they were in 2 years ago.
Right. So 21,000 in this financial year, is that a target that we could aim for or look for, looking at the fundamentals and the earning upgrades that we expect, or do you think there'll be several hiccups before we reach that figure?
I don't know what the level will be, Manisha, but I'm quite bullish on equities generally, because I think the environment is clearly, there are three things that will drive it. There's going to be sentiment, there's going to be earnings, there's going to be liquidity. I think sentiment is clearly changed already. You can see sentiment clearly, everywhere we go, we're looking at people looking much more positively at the stock market and at the world around them. I think earnings upgrades are already coming around, and I think you can see that in the way the last quarter earnings have come through. And the liquidity story we've already talked about. So with those three drivers working the way they are, I think you should see continued bullishness in the markets.
All right, lots of money flowing into emerging markets. There's actually a huge shift in large global funds focus. Yeah. Instead of 15%, now almost 25% of their fund is dedicated to emerging markets. How would you place India amongst the rest?
See, I think the overall flows are really driven by a few things. I think it's driven firstly by a view on currencies. And the general view is that, currencies like the Indian currency are likely to appreciate. That's always a good thing for flows. I think it's driven by the generally low level of interest rates in many of the markets around the world. And as I said earlier, the growing risk appetite for investors. So that's the environment under which we are operating. In that environment, I think India has several benefits because, as I said earlier, I think the India consumption story, the India domestic story, and you can take this in terms of whether it's the question of any consumption good which caters to the billion population in India, or it caters to the infrastructure needs of India and the $550 billion of infrastructure spend that is required over the next 5-year plan period. I think each of these things is quite unique to an India story. And I think India has traditionally been under-owned in foreign portfolios. So I think you will continue to see, therefore, that interest in India and money coming back into this market.
Let's give an estimate. If it's a long-term investor looking at Indian equities over a 3 to 5 year period, what's the average return that he or she can expect?
I think given that's typically a function of what alternate assets would give them. I think in the current market, I think if somebody got 15% in a market like India, they should be very happy.
All right, so 15% plus in India. What could derail the India growth story? Are there is there anything that worries you?
I think there are 2 or 3 things that I would say we need to keep on the watch list. I think the one issue that many people talk about is the whole security environment. We are in a neighborhood which is not necessarily always stable, and I think that security environment is something that is something that's always worth keeping a watch on. I think the second thing is that we should generally look at, given the liquidity has driven asset prices to where they are. I think just keeping a watch on global liquidity and what the central banks do when central banks start actually tightening their belts. Who starts, and where the story will, how they engineer a slowdown, how they engineer the tightening of interest rates. I think that will be the second thing to look for.
All right, we'll take a quick break, Ajay. We'll come back to grill you on a little bit of what Ajay is all about and what does he do in his free time, if he has any of that at all. Keep watching. We'll be back. We're in conversation with Ajay Srinivasan. Welcome back. I'm in conversation with Ajay Srinivasan, CEO of Aditya Birla Financial Services Group. Ajay, I'm going to shift gears a bit and talk about Ajay as a person. Do you get time to do anything outside of work? I mean, with all this vision of taking the group to become one of the top 3, is there time to do anything outside?
I do, and I believe very strongly that you need to be able to develop an all-round personality for myself and for my team. I constantly tell my people, you need to work hard, but equally you need to play hard, because I think you can't have a unidimensional.
What do you play?
So I play golf. That's my current passion. I used to play cricket. I was very passionate about cricket. Played a lot of cricket in India. Played in Hong Kong.
But the shift to golf is because there's so many more big deals that you can do on the golf course.
No, it's just old age, I guess, Manisha. There's nothing else. I think golf is a game I can kind of adjust. I can play 9 holes. I can play it anywhere in the world. I couldn't play cricket everywhere I traveled. So I enjoy going and traveling the world. That's another passion of mine. I love to travel. So if I can travel and play golf together, then that's a wonderful combination.
And how's family time spent?
Family time is spent with, I have 2 children and a wife, and we spend a lot of time together. I think that's very important for me. I think family grounds you, and I think family ultimately is the most important part of one's life.
So when you finally exit, do you have a retirement plan very close in mind, or you want to continue working for many, many more years?
No, I mean, I think I really enjoy work. Work for me is a passion. It's a mission for me. So I don't treat it as anything other than that. And I think when you have something like that, then you really don't think about ending it. You think about how can I make this go, and where will this morph into, and what will it look like.
So hanging up your boots is not in the horizon at all.
No.
So let me ask you through another interesting question. What do you think everybody who works with you thinks about you?
I wish I knew, and probably maybe it's a good thing I don't know.
All right. What is a personal vision and a personal goal you have for yourself beyond work? What is it that makes you tick, and what is it that you would like to achieve?
I think when you're talking about achievement, I'm presuming you're talking about in my work life, because I think what I'd like to really do is to build an institution, I think, that can really deliver the potential and the promise that I think exists in the country in which I'm working, in the industry in which I'm working. I think there's a wonderful opportunity today. There's almost a blank sheet of paper for somebody to come and draw a vision and make that vision come true. And I think I'm very fortunate in the way I am to be able to be in this position where I can actually make that vision kind of come real. So that's really what I'm driven by, to see this vision, to draw it on a piece of paper, to get a bunch of people to join me in this vision, to make this dream come true. Because I think if we can all make that happen together, I think, who knows, we could create not just an Indian institution of some pedigree and substance, but even a global institution of some materiality.
So global ambitions. We'll end with that. Ajay Srinivasan, thank you very much for joining us on NDTV. Pleasure to have you.